Time to bring in our Monday panel, former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Costa and former New South Wales Labor Treasurer Michael Costa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Chris.
Good to have you here. Can I just ask quickly about the national anthem? Michael Costa, I guess it'll be something that the AFL will steal and put on Indigenous round, and likewise with the NRL. Did you enjoy it? Did you like it?
Yeah, I see no objection to it, as long as what we're not seeing a dumbing down of the Australian national anthem. So, like, the flag has been dumbed down, and people sort of now. But the point is that our national symbols are important. The anthem's important. The flag's important, and people shouldn't feel, on any occasion they feel like it, that they can, change the wording or the language of the national anthem or rewrite the national flag. I mean, national symbols are important. On a one-off occasion or a special occasion's fine, but let's otherwise stick to the national anthem, because that's what it is. It is a national anthem, and you couldn't imagine the Americans, treating that national anthem in any way other than in the way it's treated now, which is with great reverence, Chris.
You make a good point, but Michael Costa, we've already changed one of the words in the national anthem. Why can't we change young to one, for instance?
I agree with changing it, I have to say, Chris. I think these things have got to evolve. I wouldn't do it for political reasons. I mean, in the face of activism, I would resist and take the sort of more conservative line. But as I suppose, an evolutionary acceptance of, some of the issues that are around, I don't think it's a big change. But I agree with Michael Costa. I mean, these things, we can't change them willy-nilly. A change like that to refer to, the past, I think is appropriate, but we don't want to, go overboard on all of this. And in terms of the event itself, I thought it was fantastic.
It was. Why can't Victoria get back to work, Michael Costa? The Premier will allow only 50% of private workers back in January, that's the 11th, and only 25% of public servants will need to return on the same day next year. Is not the economy of Victoria on its absolute knees and in need of rescuing?
Mate, the Victorian economy is smashed. I was in the city today. It's unbelievable how many restaurants and cafes have just closed their doors and just walked. The Victorian economy is on its knees. When JobKeeper finishes at the end of March, you're going to see a serious downturn in the Victorian economy, much worse than it is now. And no one's got the virus in Victoria. No one's bringing the virus in. The gestation period is passed to pick it up from paper or door handles or car doors or whatever else. So I don't know how you catch the virus in Victoria. So I don't know why everyone isn't back at work. I mean, why you'd only have a quarter of the public service back at work. They haven't lost any money. None of them been fired. They're the people who've revelled in essential financial luxury during this period. It's the private sector, small business, that has been smashed in this state. So I don't see why everyone shouldn't be back at work now, Chris, quite frankly, because we don't have the virus in Victoria any longer, and the economy needs people to stimulate growth, employment, and, in the retail sector, particularly, it's the most important month of the year, sales for them.
December, yes, December, the most important month of the year. Michael Costa, as a former treasurer, can you understand why you'd give, the public service another month off?
Well, Andrew, I think there's a broader issue here. It's how many businesses are actually going to have all of their staff back. I know from around the business people, a lot of them are now making adjustments to have, hot desking and less staff in a permanent result of this COVID crisis. There's talk up here of, at least 2 or 3 days a week, people working from home. Now, that's slightly different to the point you're making, which is, if you haven't had a case in so many days, why are we continuing with these measures? And that includes the other measures as well, the masks and everything else. That's a fair point. That's more about political grandstanding and elections, I think, than long-term, economic requirements. But I think there will be a change in terms of the structure of employment patterns, and less people will be working in the CBDs as a result of this.
Yeah, I'll stick with you, Michael Costa, as the former Treasurer, because Victoria and New South Wales, the New South Wales part was a bit of a shock, lost their AAA credit rating today as S&P downgraded both over a weaker outlook and debt burdens. What are the disadvantages of something like that occurring when it comes to borrowing, infrastructure, etc.?
Well, you've got to remember Treasury, these rating agencies, ruled the waves in terms of economic policy, and we did everything we could to maintain our AAA credit rating. But things have changed. Last week you have, and I made this point last week as well on your program, Chris. These reserve banks, central banks, have just changed people's way of phrasing these economic issues. You had Lowe last week, the governor of the Australian Reserve Bank, say he didn't care about ratings. And in fact, he said something even more extraordinary. He didn't care about house prices if the reports that I saw were right. So really, the climate has changed. I think it's for the worse. What these ratings implications are only small in terms of this current thing. It's only probably between $10 million in a budget in Victoria of probably 70 billion, and New South Wales even larger. But that's not what it's about. It's about discipline on your spending. It's about giving a framework to ensure that you don't get out of control on your spending, and also that you maintain efficient practices within the public service. And that's what's disappointing about the change of attitude that we're seeing everywhere.
Michael Costa, the West Australian border will reopen to New South Wales and Victoria tomorrow, but the Premier is not ruling out another closure. How does anyone book $4,000 for their family to go from the East Coast over to Perth with that kind of flexible approach to this whole thing? It's just bizarre. And he delivered it like, as I said before, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah, he did. Look, it's the Western Australian and Queensland premiers who, quite frankly, when we look back over this period, are going to be the most criticised. They're popular now. But what have they done? They've basically existed, Chris, on scaring the living daylights out of their citizens. That clip you played before of Palaszczuk, that was appalling. Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders, not for those, down south people from New South Wales. And there's Berejiklian providing support with the planes for the, for the fires. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But, this is lowest common denominator stuff. This is playing to a base level of politics. It's a race to the bottom, which is I'm the only one that can protect you from this terrible virus, from these terrible eastern staters coming over to Western Australia. Well, there will come a day when the Western Australian economy is suffering very badly, and people will look back on this period and realise that he kept the borders shut for too long and caused immense damage to Western Australian tourism. He's riding high at the minute, but that will not last because this is fool's gold. And as I said, all he's trying to do is make political capital by scaring the living daylights out of West Australians in advance of an election, of course.
Yeah, we should crack a smile when he tells people the good news. To the Attorney General's new IR plans, Michael Costa, they're very early in the piece, I know. It won't be decided this week. Bosses caught underpaying their workers could face fines and jail time, while casuals may have stronger rights after 12 months to demand a permanent job. You can't actually say that they are major reforms because they're not. There's a little bit of tinkering and tinkering only, isn't there? No,
the wording of it, I mean, when you say underpayment, we're talking about systemic underpayment. I hope we're not going to get to the position where, on a weekly basis, if there's some issue in the accounting system, you've got people screaming. These things happen. But systemic underpayment, I think the majority of Australians support tougher measures on this. We saw what happened with all the restaurants and everything, a couple of years back. In terms of casuals, that's been the direction for a long time. Part of that's driven by, of course, the casualisation of the economy. My disappointment is these are not the real reforms you need. The real reforms are the ones that go towards productivity. Work practices creeping in a range of industries, including the building industry as usual, and we've seen that, everywhere where these infrastructure projects are, and more general industrial relations reform to ensure that, there's a focus on entrepreneurship and on flexibility in the workplace. Now, they've walked away from that. They're not going to do anything about that. This stuff is really small beer in terms of IR reform.
Very, very true. I've run out of time. We could talk longer, but Michael Costa, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.